Greetings, participants of Carney Sando Reinstitute. I'm Christine Jerbeck, and I wanted to take a couple of moments to talk about the inspiration around this presentation and how it all kind of came about. And our presentation focuses on confidence and how to leverage confidence in order to increase one's leadership capacity. And it's a simple concept, but it is really the heart, I think, of what we do as leaders and how we're perceived and how we can be the most effective in our various roles that we take on. And when I was thinking about ways that this could be best illustrated to a group of aspiring or practicing women leaders, I thought about things that I had most enjoyed at different conferences. And I've always enjoyed the stories from experienced heads of school, from upcoming leaders, and how they were able to sort of illustrate some of the challenges that they had and some of the strategies that they employed in order to overcome some of those challenges. And so I'm really fortunate today to be joined by two co-presenters, Bridget McNamara and Julia Rainin, who were willing to collaborate with me on this project in order to bring to light some of the shared joys and challenges that we have and some of the potential strategies that we might employ together so that we can continue to support each other, that we can continue to find ways to thrive in our roles. And so what we have for you today are interviews, starting with two students from the class of 2021 and finishing with a long experienced career head of school who is now serving as a member of the Department of State. So I would like then to open up the floor to my co-presenters so that they have a chance to discuss the why of why they feel like this topic is important.
Great. So I'm happy to start off. So I'm Bridget McNamara. I am the founder and chief navigation officer of Sidecar Council. I'm passionate about getting more women into leadership roles in international schools and helping them thrive once there. So Christine, to your question about confidence, this is a timely topic. In my daily conversations with women leaders, it's clear to me that gosh, school leaders are exhausted, physically, mentally, spiritually. Burnout is here and it's real. It's probably affecting most of you listening to this presentation right now. Leaders are dropping out of the profession. They're taking time off, or they're still operating, but maybe at a fraction of the capacity that they had pre-COVID. We're entering a new era where school leadership needs a reframe because COVID has shown that expectations placed on leaders are unacceptable and unsustainable. So we're entering uncharted territory, and that's where confidence comes in. And I can elaborate on that further, but I'll kick it over to Julia to have the benefit of her early thoughts about this.
Thanks, Bridget. Christine, thank you so much for having us here today. It's such a pleasure and a joy to speak with you both from Toronto, where I'm currently the co-founder of Clear Crossing Academy. We're offering bite-sized learning and professional development online in the cross-section of leadership, storytelling, and workplace culture. I want to really echo what Bridget just said in terms of the alarming rates in which women are potentially thinking about, number one, being challenged, and number two, even potentially dropping out or stepping back or stepping to a side of the progression that we've made over the past many decades. And so why now? Reclaiming space in the workplace particularly is urgently needed. And I think the pandemic has really highlighted that for us in the workforce, specifically in education and across industry. In the 2020 Women in Workplace report published by McKinsey & Co. and leanin.org back in September 2020, more than 55% of women at senior levels of leadership reported feeling exhausted by their work. 40% were reporting burnout, and then 35% were already reporting feeling that there was a great pressure to be doing more at work. This report was followed up by another even more troubling report later on in the pandemic, closer to the time that we're talking now, titled "The Pandemic's Gender Effects," again, authored by McKinsey. And really, what McKinsey's saying here is that women continue to be disproportionately impacted, specifically due to what's going on with the global pandemic crisis, and it's setting women back. Because of the pandemic and because of our current workplace conditions, more than 2 million women, particularly mothers with young children under the age of 10, are considering leaving their place of work altogether. In order to reset themselves within their family and potentially reset their sights with their career moving forward. What this report suggests, and what I love about it, is the next forward-thinking steps. And they're calling humanity to step up in support of each other, specifically women, women who are minorities in the workplace and women who are in leadership positions, to be promoting outspoken leadership development within the workplace and in society in general, and that we begin robust training around leadership development, which in my opinion, relates or correlates directly to our need for confidence and to really take aim at this topic in reclaiming our space in the workforce.
And interestingly too, a little bit along to what Julia was saying, a recent article from the Harvard Business Review showed that women lead better in a crisis, that on these measurable leadership competencies, 13 out of the 16 women far outperformed men against these criteria. Yet at the same time, I think what we all know is that women tend to downplay their effectiveness. And so they don't see that they are more effective or that they are highly effective in their roles. And so as a result, we're really looking at that confidence gap because the skills are there. And the proof is there that women are highly effective, but they don't always recognize that. And so what are some of those barriers and how can we work together to help remove some of them?
Yeah, and I'd love to just jump in there and pick up on that. I think what we're getting at a little bit is this notion of confidence coming from, oh, I've done that before, and therefore I can do it again. And I think we need to do a bit of a reframe here. So think about anyone setting off on a grand adventure to an unknown destination. So you might think about explorers who set off to discover what's beyond their known world. You might think about an author putting pen to paper for the first chapter of a novel, or a parent greeting their newborn child for the first time. There isn't a handbook for these things. Previous experience just simply doesn't apply because this is new territory. And so this is where I believe confidence comes in. Let's look at the actual literal meaning of confidence. It is to have full trust. So this doesn't imply that you know exactly what you're doing or how you're going to solve a certain problem or the correct way to get from here to there. It does mean that you believe you can figure it out based on your belief in the purpose of the enterprise in the first place, your openness to learning as you go, your capabilities and skills, and importantly, your willingness to ask for help and guidance along the way. We all know that women are better at asking for directions than men, right? So if we apply this to women in school leadership, women have been operating in a landscape that wasn't made with them in mind. But we've already had this, beginnings of this conversation. COVID has made clear that this landscape has to adapt because we're going to need, first of all, we're going to need more leaders to replace those who've burned out. You just brought up about female attributes in a crisis. I think COVID has shown that we need female attributes to help shape a more equitable inclusive, and sustainable approach to schooling and to school leadership. And so those that have been talked about in terms of COVID that have helped women leaders of countries, of businesses, of schools, even of families, frankly, get through this COVID era are things like deep listening, empathy, inclusiveness, and again, and importantly, a willingness to share power and the spotlight. So if we can acknowledge and celebrate those attributes, that's a first step. But then let's add confidence to that toolkit. I think we need to not confuse confidence with arrogance. Confidence is not something you are, it's something you have, and you can develop it.
Bridget, I think that's a perfect segue actually into taking a look at what our three guests have to share with us regarding their journey as leaders and their experience around building and leveraging confidence throughout their careers as educational leadership heads and influencers in this space. Christine, I want to thank you again so much for convening us in this conversation today. And for everyone out there who's watching, I really hope that this information hits you and lands with you well, and that you can continue the conversation with your networks, with your groups in talking about really reclaiming space for women in the workplace, specifically in education, and how we can gather together in support of one another in building confidence moving forward.
I am thrilled and excited today to be joined by two members of the class of 2021 at KCP Carl C. Parrish School in Barranquilla, Colombia, where I serve as a secondary principal. So it's my honor today to introduce to you Christina and Valeria Da. And they have exactly 1 week left of school before they head out to their next adventure. And these two women have just made incredible marks here at KCP. They have been involved in absolutely everything and have not let anything slow them down, even though for their juniors and senior year, they've spent more than half of that time learning distance, and they haven't been at school since the end of March, and will maybe have a couple of days on campus before they have to say goodbye to their school, which they've been attending since they were 3 or 4 years old. So this is a really big, incredible opportunity for them. So I would just like to start out by learning a little bit more about you and where you're going, what your plans are for the future. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what's going to happen next year?
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Ebeck. And I think it's an honor to hear those words. They're pretty inspiring, and they really take back on the mission that Valeria and I, as twins and as a team, have made in the school. So in this year, and throughout all my life, I've been pretty a structured person. And I think structure is a really good thing, but I've also learned like to embrace the part of risks. And that is something that I'm looking forward in the future, taking a big jump, going to university, maybe it's the University of Notre Dame. But I would really like to go out of my comfort zone and start there. Try to expand my horizons by studying the discipline of business. I'm not sure what I'm going to major in, but what I'm sure is that in the future, I would like to envision myself as a leader or participant of any company that would like to embrace new stories and is inclusive and would like to put on that print and that mark that's will not change the world entirely, but start making those steps in order for everybody, so everybody can include themselves into that journey and start making it a natural mission for everyone to start thinking in others and start being inclusive overall.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christina. Valeria.
Well, I'm Valeria Dow. So as Ms. Jarovic said, I'm from Barranquilla, Colombia. We have lived our entire life here. But in my future goals, I have been recently admitted to Yale University. want to maybe embark on an undergraduate journey focused on economics, and maybe a sociology, also a sociology focus during my academic career in Yale. But I want my goals for the future, for this near future, would be to prepare myself towards my not academic, but also a leader preparation to work on international policy making towards international economics. So that would be my goals. And as Christina said, my twin sister, really my goals as the future, as rather as a leader, is to really educate myself. First of all, educate myself, really get to learn from others' backgrounds, other stories, and really find a way to make others' voices and stories be heard as well as mine. So that would be like my goal.
Fantastic, incredible goal. We talked about inclusivity. What does that mean? What does that look like? And I'm curious why you chose that word.
I think Christina was the one that said inclusivity, but in my terms, I view inclusivity as a behavior, as an attitude, I guess. As a behavior, as an attitude of well, sorry for the redundance, but including or maybe making others feel empowered of their own value, of their own power of change, of being agents of change, being inclusive of others being let known about that they can be a part of something, that they can really work on something, and they are valued for their work and for their different talents.
I also have one thing to add right there on the part of inclusivity, that it's also working on that part of like an ecosystem, I like it to call, but being part of and being empowered in a mission that's bigger than your own. And that's when you're really empowered, when you're getting to touch other people's lives, and at the same time empowering yourself to become a better person, a better leader, but also like viewing the picture above and beyond. And that's when I feel that it's really inclusive and like, yeah, it's like a collective progress, I would like to say. And that's what I feel also of inclusivity of the word.
And who else needs to be included? Who needs to be at this decision-making table?
I can take on this one.
Okay.
So when we talk about the word inclusivity, it's really, there's no certain like label, I guess, no certain stereotype, no certain ideal narrative behind who is that person that needs to be involved in something. So I would guess that, as cliche as it may be, inclusive really really applies to everybody, and everybody that wants to work on something, or everybody that maybe does not recognizes that they can be part of something, but everybody, as well as not yourself, probably not knowing that you can be part of something, but others making others, sorry for being redundant, making others know about themselves that they can be part of something. So I guess it's the two ways, rather than saying like a specific person, but maybe that certain steps that a person needs to have in order to be inclusive, or accept that inclusiveness and foster like an atmosphere of inclusiveness.
So you're basically saying, by telling who should be at that table, you're going to exclude people. So you can't determine who should be at that table, because if you do something like, if you say that exactly, then you're automatically creating an exclusive, not an inclusive environment. Very interesting.
I guess it's all about just focusing on merits. And if there's not a point where there's no merits because they have not got the chance, nobody, well, not nobody, but not everybody has the opportunity to envision what the power of the talent that the person has. So as Valeria said, everybody should be included, because who knows who's going to be good in what, and who can add value to decisions and to getting informed. That at the end of the day, I guess that being informed and being educated is the best power to make decisions and to try to have the best intentions. That is what at the end of the day it's most worth, the intentions and the goals that you have over making something happen.
Do you see any barriers to women in particular? Do you see any barriers to women being able to achieve those goals that you spoke of?
Yes.
Can I go, Vale?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I do see some barriers, and I think it's one that I had in like all of my life and as a student mostly, that it's so based on numbers, that it's like being hard on yourself and having what I said, like the structured life. I guess that women have always been like categorized and labeled into being like the educators of all the next generation, because biologically they're like biologically they're mothers, or well, they're the creators of a family with their husbands or whatever. So I guess it's the structure that's maybe affecting them, and maybe having a risk and going above the boundaries is something that is affecting women in leadership. And they should have this inclusive atmosphere so they feel empowered and they can like go on and take the next step and feel as if the next step is the best decision they can make.
I think I'm gonna take another take on that, but I do echo majority of what Christina just said. But I feel that for our generation, besides the societal expectations that women do have, although we have progress as a whole, as a society, as a community in Latin America, worldwide, in our global community, the progress of empowering women and recognizing the value that women do have in leadership, in leadership worldwide. I think that right now the biggest problem in our generation facing a barrier towards women empowerment would be that we face a culture of call it culture, it's named, and we live right now in an era of that demonization and polarization has really struck out in our landscape, our social landscape. And I guess that that being afraid of failing, being afraid of maybe that kind of like taking a negative connotation for failure rather than having a positive or maybe an optimistic look on what failure can be, of trying new things, facing challenge with the brightest view is maybe one of the biggest barriers we have as women. That now is like social media and like being in an era of the highest scrutiny women can face because of what I said, call it culture. I think that's one of the biggest barriers that women have, that maybe we can feel frightened about taking that leap towards believing in ourselves and believing in other women, of challenge and taking that role of leadership. So as a general, so like wrapping up everything, I think is that maybe that fear on of what I could be, what I could do, staying in that fear because of call it culture. So that would be probably one of the biggest barriers we faced right now. But looking on the bright side, I guess, is that what enabled us, for Christine and I, to maybe not think of and stay on with that feeling of being frightened or of failure, I guess, has been really the trust that we have in each other. Finding that support system that really believes in you, that have a mission or values challenge, values failure also, of not being scared of that, and I guess finding that support system in women and also with other genders, I guess with everybody, being in that part of being inclusive, because that would be then not being inclusive would be one of like the biggest advices I would guess that we would have for empowering on as women, as young people that are facing an era of polarization and color culture.
So my guest today is Dr. Dale Taylor, who is presently the head of school at the Aga Khan School in Dhaka, Bangladesh, on her way to India, where she will be heading up the UWC Mahindra campus of the UWC system. So I'm going to start, Dale, if you can just tell us a bit about your leadership story.
Okay, thank you so much, Bridget. I started in leadership almost by accident about 20 or so years ago. When I first went overseas, I found that there were a lot of opportunities in international schools, and there were a lot of gaps in terms of middle-level leadership. And so I just started doing things like giving extra sessions to teachers on professional development. And then somebody would approach me and say, hey, do you want to be the professional development coordinator? And, you know, I agreed. I love the responsibility and doing more. Education has always been my love, my passion. Ever since I was a child, when everybody was hating school, I was loving it because I just saw the capacity for so much and so much exploration, which I do by nature. And so getting back to the international schools, the leaders at the school saw something in me, and I would question and I would ask, why don't we have this particular curriculum? And they would say, well, do you want to go explore it? And at the time we were talking about the MIP, the IB curriculum. And so I would go off to conferences and report back. And then later on they would say, well, would you like to lead the English section or the social studies section? And so it was a gradual buildup. And I think it was something that I didn't notice in myself in regards to leadership, but other people have always noticed that, even outside of education. I remember being 17 years old and, you know, working at a camp in the kitchen, and, you know, you just do your job and you do it diligently. And they said, oh, the manager's leaving, would you manage the kitchen? You know, so, you know, like Steve Jobs says, if you go back and connect the dots, you do see a pattern. And then I remember one time, I love the arts. And so I was, you know, I joined a dance troupe, right? And in Edmonton, and it was an Afro-Caribbean dance troupe. And I thought it was pretty good. And then the head choreographer, Charlene, said, would you like to be the manager? And I thought, oh, I'm so insulted. She must mean I cannot dance as good as the other girls. But it wasn't that at all. So see where you go, where, you know, you doubt yourself.
That's right.
But she saw other capabilities in me that would help the organization. So I started managing them. We got lots of gigs, a lot of profile. It was great.
So what I'm hearing is that you, like so many women leaders, were sort of tapped or nudged into the early stages where people just saw your leadership capacity. At some point, I imagine some level of confidence must have kicked in for you then to take that to this next level of being head of school.
Exactly. And I've always been one of those sort of critical thinkers, and also you know, examined positions of privilege and power and who gets what through obviously a race lens, being a minority, and also a gender lens. And I started to unpack that early and see, okay, you know, males are given such privilege in society, but in my classes, in my education classes, a lot of what I was hearing didn't make sense. And it didn't make sense for me as a woman. It didn't make sense in general. And I'm thinking, okay, we've been sold a bill of goods here that's not quite right. And when I started to realize that, and realize that, you know, women, myself, have so much to offer that's not being done. And when you look at education, and obviously the students are so diverse, but the leaders are of a certain type, and they teach, they address a certain type, and everybody else is left out. I went into sort of like a fight mode and said, okay, this needs to change. And I want to contribute. I can contribute. I've always been blessed by obviously doing well in school, and that gave me confidence. My professors gave me confidence. The leaders who nudged me towards leadership gave me confidence that yes, you can do this, and we want your skills. And obviously I saw that not too many people were willing to step up. They were comfortable in their roles. And one thing people sort of downplay is the sheer volume of work that's involved in leading others. And I think people see the titles and the pseudo glory, but they don't see what it takes to run schools, to lead others, to bring others on board. And I was willing to do that work. I've always been idealistic. I saw it for a greater good. And then and as I was in these positions and I saw other role models, and in positions of leadership, other women who were sound, solid, knew what they were doing, I started moving towards that way. And it was a slow journey. And I'd say it usually takes a lot longer for women than for men, because we often think we have to do it perfectly or 110%. Whereas, with my male friends, they'd be in a middle-level leadership role for 2 days, and then they're looking at the top position. And I thought, I could learn from that.
So I'm delighted, first of all, to hear that you went into fight mode rather than flight mode, because too often those who don't fit the typical prototype do the flee, the flee aspect rather than the fight. It does sound like you've had a range of influences, whether they've been supporters like your professors and some of your maybe supervisors and colleagues, others who have championed your leadership journey here, probably some models here and there, although it's increasingly a narrowed scope of models when you're not a prototypical leader, right?
Right. And I was so fortunate to have those role models. And I think about Miss Wren, who hired me for my first principal position, right? And looking back at, when I was vice principal at a school prior to that, and Miss Gertrude, and what I saw in common, they were fierce women. They just knew what they were doing. They were solid. They exuded extreme confidence, and it didn't seem put on. It seemed genuine. Now I realize there must have been stories behind that. Gertrude was willing to help me and gave me all sorts of assignments that, people don't normally get, like, for example, totally renovating, redesigning the science labs. And some of these are maybe seen as traditionally male things when you're supervising carpenters and plumbers and things like that for large scale building projects. It's sort of like engineering like. And I encourage women to do those things that you don't think are typical, like get out of the office, like work on these buildings, work on the site, work on the infrastructure. It all helps you.
Sure. It sounds to me like those are all aspects of building confidence too. You were saying that so much of being a leader is just hard work. But when you are getting outside of your comfort zone and doing these other things that maybe you're not trained for or aren't your favorite thing, you do get some level of confidence from that. I wonder if you could speak a little bit, Dale, then to what confidence means to you.
Okay. Confidence means that, you're secure in yourself and your own decisions, and you can back up your decisions, but you don't have to justify them. And you can just be, right? And also confidence means that you're secure enough in yourself, you can listen to the input of others as well, because you don't want to collapse, confidence with arrogance and feel like, okay, I know everything there is to know. That's not how schools can run. You need multiple people and multiple perspectives in order to run a school. But confidence means you're secure in your own knowledge, you have an awareness of where the gaps are in your own knowledge, and you have the willingness to consult with others and bring others on board, right?
Yeah,
For one voice. And confidence also means like being willing to make tough calls, difficult decisions, you know, and being sure in that. And also, competence is also about letting the criticism roll off your back, like letting that go and not taking that on emotionally. You know, so confidence requires a certain amount of mental strength, you know, because when you're in the roles that I'm in, others are in, you will get criticism. You will get a lot of that. And I think that traditional training for women of, you know, being nice to everybody, not upsetting anybody, needs to go clear out the window, you know, in order for you to be truly confident, or you'll be blowing about like a reed.
Yes,
so you
indeed.
need that solid core within yourself, that you know you're doing the very best, and you always have, you know, the students or whatever your charge is, interests, their best interests at heart, you know.
Do you have any tricks for getting into a confident mindset?
Take the steps to do small things, small projects that build your confidence over time, you know, and know that it's for women. I often think confidence is not always a given. For me, on a personal level, mental fitness, physical fitness goes together, right? So it's important for us to take care of our bodies, to maintain that strength, that power, that endurance as well. So if exercise and fitness is a trick, I'm all for it.
Oh,
You know?
I love it. I love it. I agree 100%. Well, and I am very thankful to you for sharing your stories and your tips, and you're a little basket of goodies.
Okay, thank you.
So, Dr. Dale Taylor, thank you so much, and keep swimming.
Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to have a woman that I admire quite a lot in my life. Her name is Aileen Lee. It's such a pleasure to have you in this conversation. Aileen, where in the world are you meeting me in this conversation this morning?
So I'm in Beijing, China, and it's a beautiful morning today.
That's wonderful. What institution are you supporting currently in Beijing?
So I'm at the affiliated high school of Peking University, and I actually work for the education group that has 12 campuses for the university.
Excellent. What role are you currently fulfilling there with the group?
So I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer in terms of working with the education group, managing the 12 campuses, but I'm also the Executive Director of College Counseling, and then overseeing the college counseling in the variety of campuses, and as well as a Dean, Deputy Head of School for the Dalton Academy, which is the international division of our mothership campus.
Wow. So just a few things to name a few. Just a
and
few.
they're very long titles, right? The names, yeah. So, thank you, Peking University.
Yeah. Well, let's kick the conversation off with an initial conversation of, can you share with me a little bit about how you or why you decided to pursue leadership in your career?
At first, I wasn't sure if it was the right move for me, because I thought it was intimidating at the moment, because I'm still very new to college counseling. So I got into leadership by being the director of college counseling first, and having a team of 5 others. And then when I start to see the variety of things that I can do and the influence that we can make in a variety of campuses, I quickly got promoted to deputy head, just linking, you know, what was relevant to the job, and linking curriculum. And so because I got to see that, you know, I got to do more, then I wanted to do more, and it motivated me to learn more. And then, continue thriving by seeing the opportunities that were available to me. So then that was multiple departments that I got to dabble into. And then when that happened a year and a half after, then I got to see how I could influence multiple campuses and making sure that the campuses were having the same systems in place and ways of operations and helping them through that. So it just kept growing very organically.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That actually leads me really organically into the next question that I wanted to ask you today. And it's really like, what role did other people play throughout this iterative process as you were developing as a leader? Like who championed you, who modeled for you, who potentially maybe even sponsored you, or what maybe did you observe of things like not to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really important when you feel safe in an environment to open up, what your thoughts and share your ideas, and then getting the trust of people, whether they work for you or with you and above you. And so having that trusting relationship and that the people believing in your thoughts, that's really important. But the mentorship is really important too. So I'm very lucky that I have a few mentors in my life in terms of different departments even. So I have people that I go to in terms of college counseling and then leadership, the principals and things like that. And so, I work with my husband and that can be really hard. And I feel that I even have to work, I have to work even harder because a lot of times people may mistake that for nepotism and that I've only earned my position because of who I knew and who I was married to, but not really being identified for, what were the things that I was coming up with myself. So I think that I had to raise my voice a little louder than usual and come out and say, this is what I've proposed and this is how I'm going to make it happen. And so then you get the buy-in and know that, wow, this person does know what she's talking about. And the position wasn't just given to her. It's really hard.
I love that you brought up the notion of raising your voice and really becoming recognized for what you bring, not only to the role, but future potential as well. And that brings me to the idea of confidence. And I'm curious, what does confidence mean for you as a woman and as a leader?
I'd say it's believing in what you do and that you can do it. I think it's hard because there's an idea sometimes you're like, is this really me? Can I really do it? And you're always questioning yourself, the imposter syndrome. And so I think that the confidence comes from really within first and having the conversation so that you can be secure about yourself and what you do. And then getting the buy-in. So it's hard to foster because I think there's a lot of people that also might doubt you or not want to do and do more work that you're going to bring to the table. It might be intimidating for them, but I think really believing in what you're doing is helps foster the confidence.
Starting with ourselves really does promote that mindset that's necessary to be confident. I love that. Absolutely. Forward thinking about the generation that is coming up right on our heels. What actions are you actively taking to pull other women up as you climb, literally, in your career?
It's funny because my team right now, it's mostly in the college counseling team anyways, it's actually all female. And I really try to look for a balance because we talk about how important diversity is. There's another component to our jobs is the cultural component, especially being in China too. And you'll see that there are still some roles that are more predominantly, one gender, one sex over the other. And, college counseling is one of them, but so it just worked out that way. But I think a lot of times we have to give voices and realize who's louder in the room. I've been reading this book called Culture Map, and culture isn't just what country you're from and ethnicity, but I think also female and male culture, and how our personalities or how we behave in certain ways. So having women have a voice in their room, because traditionally, stereotypically, they say men are louder in the room, and so trying to navigate that and give more opportunities to women is also important, and listening to their voices in some of the meeting rooms. But where I am, it just happens that that room isn't like that. And so we're very lucky that we listen to each other, and we're like a group of sisters, and we know what kind of struggles we may face. So for example, you know, when we go to conferences, or when I've been to a conference and I've told them things that I've experienced as a female and as a woman, and I kind of tell them, like, this is something that you might face, you know, so make sure, you know, you try to counter that, or be cognizant of that, and so you can, you know, behave differently, or counter whatever that we might experience. Because I've been in rooms and luncheons where, you know, men prefer to listen to men, or they'll make it very clear, and they're just louder than we are. So I think being aware of the stereotypes, and then seeing if you're experiencing that, and see if there's a way we can counter it, is very important to tell them and coach them.
Mm-hmm. Really checking our bias, you know, potentially before we leave the house in the morning, and also like thinking through that cross-cultural communication lens. I previously have referred to Culture Map myself to sort of help me navigate some instances and some spaces previous that it does. I'm just recalling one of the very best things I think that book taught me was understanding how to literally read the air, or read in between the lines of potentially what's not being said, to understand the fullest extent of what is happening in your presence, or potentially beyond your presence after a meeting, sort of like the meeting after the meeting, and so on and so forth. So I love I've definitely relied on that myself, for sure. Finally, I'm very curious, what advice would you give to women who are aspiring to be leaders in the future?
I think it's really important to keep going, and making sure that no one, you know, stops you from doing what you want to do, especially because you're a woman. I think that it's hard to also find women mentors. I think that because it's so hard, and they've done so much to get where they have to be, sometimes it's hard to find women mentors, because they know that they've done so much to get there, that they want other women to be challenged too. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I feel like I have. And so don't let, you know, one bad apple ruin it for the others, and you have to keep trying and keep seeking the right mentor, the right people that you want to surround yourself with to raise you up, because it's not always easy to find those types of people. But it's hard work, and I really truly think that if you find the right people, that they will support you, and the right attitude, and you really can't give up.
No, definitely. It's about really a practice of resilience, building your resilience, and just circling back to the idea of mentors. Ultimately, not everyone's going to be a fantastic mentor or a fit for you, and so really encouraging, younger women who might be thinking about tapping who that next mentor might be, in terms of thinking like a variety of mentors who might be, my collection of mentors that are going to support and champion me or sponsor me in different ways, because those are relationships that do, shape shift and change over the years, I found.
Yeah, and they don't have to be in the exact same industry, right? And so like I have a really good mentor right now who's been around the international education for decades, and every time I visit his office, it's just, I'm being mind blown. Like I have so many, he has so many ideas, and he's really inspirational. But then, in terms of women empowerment, I wouldn't really go to him. And then seeing the other fierce female leaders and reading books of what they do and what stimulates their minds, I think it's also really important to find the different types of media. Like you don't have to see them in person all the time and have those conversations, but even having, following them on Twitter and seeing specific people, we are the age now, it's just we have so much resources that we can use. It's amazing.
We really do. We really do. So I feel like we definitely see eye to eye on just different ways that we might look to inspire, you know, those who are coming right up after us. And it's an exciting time, I think, for many young women to be thinking about shaping their career in leadership. With that said, I can't thank you enough for joining me in this brief conversation today. It's been such a pleasure, and I wish you all the best in Beijing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm excited today to be joined by Dr. Robin Heslip, who is currently serving as the regional officer for the Department of the Office of Overseas Schools, the Department of State. Has a long career in serving as international school leaders and directors on many continents around the world. And so, Dr. Heslip, I would just like to begin by asking you what prompted you to seek leadership roles?
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for including me in this focus. You know, I would say that it was encouragement and support from others around me, colleagues that would say, yeah, you can do this much better than that's being done. But also I had several mentors, primarily male, who said, we want to support and encourage and nurture your leadership abilities so that you can become a head of school. And of course I went like this and said, oh no. I had always wanted to be a teacher. And so I was at my best when I was with children and kids and doing that. And so that leadership in that regard, as far as being an administrative leader, was not something that I had aspired to or thought that I would be until I met, you know, it really was Bob Sills, who I worked with in Rabat. It was Dick Kreitzar, who I worked with in Kuala Lumpur, and Phil Jocelyn, who I worked with in Buenos Aires. And each of them, in their own very unique way, helped me realize the importance of networking and being a part of rather than watching it happen. You know, it's sort of like the Hamilton in the room where it happens. And I think that became more appealing to me. And so the nurturing and the encouragement and the support in the development of and desire for a leadership role in an administrative position came from working with people and realizing that, you know, I would say there are things about leadership that you're either born with or not, and other things that you learn. And so it's sort of like teaching. It's a science and an art. The art is a part of you, and the science is what you learn, and in order to do it well. And leadership is like that. It's an art and a science. And that, I think that's probably one of the most important characteristics of leadership, is being able to sort of set the stage, but allow others to take on the roles of leadership, and you support them in that, and it becomes their idea, and it naturally becomes even a better idea than what you had at the beginning. So and I would say Phil Jocelyn just, I think he wanted me to move on so that he could get someone who wouldn't always question what was happening. No, in seriousness, he also said, career-wise, this is your next move will be to be a head of school. And I remember going to Phil and saying, there's a position open. It was in Rabat at that time. And I was a principal. I was going to enter my 4th year, and he said, "You're not ready yet." And, I was taken back by that. I thought, who are you to say I'm not ready? Thinking in my mind, when in reality, he was absolutely right. Because it's interesting with leadership, I think a lot about, before I went into being a head of school, that level of leadership, I always found myself really attached to C words: children, collaboration, communication, caring, creativity, all of those C words. Whereas I saw heads of school being really connected to the B words: budgets, boards, buildings, busing, balls, and other kinds of B words. And it wasn't until I was a head of school that I realized you needed those B words in order to make the C words flourish. So it was this combination of both. And I think Phil helped me see that, because immediately he had me participate in the finance committee and learn all about budgets and budgeting and finance. I knew about finance, but budgeting, that business side of a school. And he also put me on the personnel side committee of the board. And he said, part of your C words have to include challenging conversations. And he said, as leaders, we like to avoid those. And he said, you can't, and you have to learn how to do it well. And so I think that was what they saw, that ability to adapt to those skills that were needed, or you could shine on it. And you need to believe that you can do it, and that you have an extremely important role to play as a leader, a role model for other women. There aren't enough of us. And then they talked to me about AAIE and other events that we would go to, conferences, and the lack of women in leadership roles. And, that played right into my desire to not have things the way they are, but to change them. And it led to really me saying, yes, I can be a head of school, and I will be, and I'll pay it forward then by encouraging and supporting other women and men to be leaders and go on to be heads of school and in leadership positions.
One other C word that I'm thinking of is confidence. In what would you say the role of confidence plays in things that you can ultimately become a head of school? What role does confidence play in that?
I think that the reality is having confidence, but not letting it turn into arrogance. And that's a critical part. And unfortunately, I think women have to be even more attuned to that than men. Men come across as confident, and sometimes when we are presenting, or we're proposing, or we're leading a faculty meeting, some people perceive our confidence as arrogance. And I learned that the hard way. And interestingly enough, it was when I went to Abu Dhabi, and my executive assistant said, Wahida said, Robin, some people have this view of you that I don't understand where it comes from. And they feel, and she didn't use the term arrogance, but that was basically what it was. And I said, well, what is it that I do or don't do? And she said, well, you need to, you aren't smiling, and when you're walking, it's like you're very serious.
Mm.
And I said, oh my God, I'm so into my head most of the time that I don't even realize that I'm doing that. She said, you always speak to people, but it isn't like you're speaking with them. They're getting the idea that you're speaking to them. And so I had to realize what people don't know a lot. One of the things that they can find interesting is that in truth, I'm very much an introvert. And it takes every ounce of energy that I have to, talk in front of large groups, to mingle at cocktails or in conferences. I would much rather, be in a store buying a carpet where everyone brings the carpets to you and rolls them out. That's sort of my my analogy or my comparison to the way that I like, come to me and I'll talk to you forever individually, but in a group, I would just let someone else shine. I would rather let that. And so I think that aspect of me being an introvert was, it was not as, and being an introvert, I was still confident, but there were things that I just didn't like to do that others felt that's a part of, that means that you're arrogant, and it wasn't. So it's finding that balance with leadership and confidence versus arrogance. So
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I feel very similarly. I feel like an introvert. I feel like I'm not somebody who enjoys the stage, but I recognize that that's a really important piece of my job, of my persona, of my being taken seriously as a leader. And so that's really, I think that's great for everybody to hear, because it shouldn't stop us.
From these current leaders and aspiring leaders, I hope that you've been able to get some really strong takeaways about how confidence is probably endemic in all of us. And just as a final thought, confidence, like COVID, is contagious. But unlike COVID, it's a good contagion. We should be doing everything we can to help it spread. So let's take off those masks, because the more people have true confidence, and by that, again, I mean full trust in themselves, based not on what they've done already, but on their openness to learning, their capabilities and skills, and their willingness to ask for help and guidance, the more likely it is that our schools and our communities will thrive.